Okay, so I'm going to start out by talking about misconceptions. And the first question is to explain misconceptions as they relate to science. So, misconceptions in science can be things that children or students believe based on experiences they've had in their life. So, a common one would be like one we did in class was the water and paper clips. Kids think that, well, even we thought as college students think that if you fill a cup up to the brim of almost overflowing, they won't be able to fit very many paper clips in it, when in reality you can fit a lot more than we all expected. And then another misconception could be what creates the phases of the moon, which we did in class as well, which not all of us knew, and we had to figure that out ourselves. Which segues into the next question, which is how are misconceptions important in science instruction? And we talked a lot in class about making mistakes, and science is one of those subjects that you have to learn from your mistakes. Trial and error. Students do some of their best learning when they're making mistakes and learning from those mistakes. So they have to experiment and explore and figure out what works and what doesn't work and what they need to change in order to learn. So that's how misconceptions are important in science. And then to leverage student misconceptions, I think that you could, like we talked about in class, create a discrepant event, which is something that defies the logic that they already have set in their mind. And so you try and create these situations that you know that they will fail at first, but ultimately they'll be learning from it as well. So, and now the progression of standards. It says, please explain what the term progression of standards means in regards to the NGSS. So progression of standards basically just means that you show how each standard builds off of each other at each grade level. So it builds off of prior knowledge. It helps, it helps make connections and build groups, and it helps you dive deeper into the subject. And then why the NGSS has the progression of standards, like you said, like each grade level builds and builds off of each standard, I guess. Like the DCI that I did for my bulletin board was the atoms and molecules, and so like at the elementary level they're learning like solid, liquid, gas, and how particles and molecules are moving in those. And then at the middle school level, they're learning like what makes up the atoms, and I guess at the middle school level is when they're learning like how the molecules are moving. And then at the high school level is when they are learning what makes the atom makeup and other interactions between it. And then please explain your role would be as a 5th grade teacher focused on teaching content related to NGSS performance expectations. So the standard 5 PS13 was make observations and measurements to identify materials based on their properties. So as a 3rd grade or 5th grade teacher, your role would be to set students up so that they could identify materials like based on their properties, whether it be like liquid, gas, solid, like a powdery substance. And it says on the NGSS standards here, like you can have them, properties could include like color or hardness. It could include thermal conductivity, reflectivity, things like that. So you want to set it up so that your kids are grouping things based on properties of matter. So it's building off of the matter and its interactions standard from the grades below. And then the 5E learning cycle. So the desired outcome for each stage. So the first stage is engage, and that is where you're wanting to ask open-ended questions and just get students' minds flowing and get them interested in what you are about to do. Ask them questions, make connections to their real life, just to get their brains focused in on what we're going to be doing and get them excited about what you're going to be doing. And that could be like doing a fun little activity to start, or like showing them a fun little like singing, dancing video, or just like asking them questions. Like for my experiment for my lesson that we did with the pumpkins, it was right before Halloween, so I was like, what holiday is coming up? What do you think of when you think of Halloween? What happens when pumpkins are set out for a while? And so that really got them thinking, and that got them connecting to their real life. And then the explore stage is the activity stage. And in this stage, you typically want to have some productive struggle, and you want them to be questioning things, you want them to be kind of confused. They should be very confused, they should sometimes maybe have some misconceptions in this stage. And an example of an explore activity could be for my experiment, we had them with like each pumpkin slice, and they did they just get to use different materials on the pumpkin and manipulate it however they want, and that's how we taught them about like control and variable. So it was a lot of fun, and they were very confused on why they were just doing all of these weird things to pumpkins, but it's fine, it worked out for the best. And then for the explain portion, that is when direct instruction comes in if needed. You can define concepts for children, and like a good example for explain would be like a foldable that reveals answers for them, and maybe define some terms that they're not familiar with that may be new to this lesson. And then after you have explain, you have elaborate, which is where students get to expand on that new knowledge. They can build off of their prior knowledge and expand on them with new concepts that they have just learned. A good example of this would be like a class like discussion, or have them do like an activity together where they're working in groups, and they have to do some sort of activity or something where they are applying this new knowledge themselves, and showing what they have learned. And then the last stage is evaluate, and this is basically when you are just checking for understanding. You want to make sure that all misconceptions have been put to rest, and it's really important that you go in this order, because it's kind of like a progression again. You have the engage, and then they're exploring, and they're a little confused, and then you explain to them, this is how it works, this is how it should be, and so they come to that realization, and they can use it again. They can use it themselves in the elaborate phase, and then the evaluate is really when you need to know, was this effective? Did they learn? Do I need to expand on it a little bit more? And then the last section is the engineering design process. And that is the first step is to ask, and that's asking what the problem is. And you want to typically set this up in your classroom as like real world problems, ones that are solvable for students at this young of an age. You know, you don't want to give them the problem like, how can we find world peace? Because, you know, that's a little complicated. And then the next step is imagine, and this is just when they are brainstorming solutions to these problems, like what they could be doing. That could be making like bubble maps or like Venn diagram, comparing and contrasting ideas, stuff like that. And then plan. That is developing steps to get to the solution. So this is when they are putting their heads together and figuring out what needs to be done to bring this idea to life. Putting it on, whether that's sketching it out or putting it on paper or writing down materials. And then after plan is the create phase, and that is when they actually follow through on these steps. It's like the building stage. They put this together, they finalize everything, you know, to see if it works, to see if it's going to get the job done. And then after create is the improve. So they've created their project or their whatever they have created, and it either succeeds or it fails, and improve is where you can evaluate your results. You know, how can you make this better? How could this be more effective? If it didn't work, how do we make it work? Or if it did work, is there a way we can make it even better than it already is? And through this process, they really get the understanding of like what all goes into creating solutions. And they get a lot of learning through the create and improve stages, because again, it's that trial and error. Like sometimes you have to fail in order to learn. And I think that this just creates another one of those learning opportunities for students. And then the last section is, which assessment or assignment did you feel was the most helpful and impactful, and why? I'm going to list 2 for this, and that would be the big 5E lesson that we did with our groups, only because, you know, we didn't have experience with 5E before this semester, and honestly, I love it. I think that it's so creative and it's fun, it's engaging, and so I really liked being able to put together a lesson like that, and one that was just like our own. And it was one of the longer lessons that we've ever taught, or that I've ever taught at least. And so it was good to get that experience of like being up in front of a classroom for that long by myself. And so I found that very helpful. I found like what all needs to be put in for a lesson like this. It's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun too. And then the other one that I found the most helpful was, while it was time consuming and very tedious at times, I did really enjoy the unit plan, just because I think a lot of people overlook just how time consuming and hard it can be to create a full like unit. Like my roommates that are not education majors, they don't understand like how much work actually goes in to my major. And I worked for like a week straight on this unit plan, and they were just like, what are you doing? And it was eye-opening for me, even because I don't think I realized just how much work goes into it. So it helped me a lot, because it helped me realize, you know, that yeah, it is hard work, but I enjoy doing it. So I know that I'm in the right major, which is good since I only have a year left. And then the last one is which assignment do you feel was not helpful or impactful? And like, this is not me just being a kiss up here, but I really enjoyed this class, and I don't think that there was an assignment that I would say to leave out in the future, because I think it was all very impactful. It was a lot of like modeling, and it was a lot of physically doing things to help us in our classroom. You know, you gave us some examples of activities that we could do in our future classrooms. You know, we each got lesson plans from everybody's, you know, that we could use in the future, which is great. Like, I really don't think that there is anything that I would leave out in future semesters. And I just want to end, I just want to say, Mr. Alberto, you have been amazing. One of my favorite College of Ed professors so far. You made class so much fun and so interesting. It was not hard to be there every day. And I just appreciate everything you do for me. Thank you.